So sort of the opening gambit is really that we want this to be a discussion and sort of interactive, because obviously there's been a lot of talk about technology today, both on asset management side and service management. But in reality, obviously we're all human, and we're actually the people and the actors have control of these systems, supposedly, until Gen AI takes over. So yeah, do feel free to ask questions, get us to clarify anything, talk about. But basically, we want to talk about human intervention around cyber, operational resilience, and basically the ways of working that we currently live in. Okay, so I'll get to Lee, and then I'll interject some further slides.
Thanks.
Well, I'll stand over here.
So hello, everyone. I'm Lee. I'm a cognitive scientist, just a really brief background. So really kind of my background is in psychology. Just finished my PhD like 4 months ago. And then I've been working in cybersecurity for just over 1.5 years for ReCyber. So really my interest is in like, how do we understand behavior? How do we measure it? And how do we change it? And like putting all those 3 things together. So it's kind of what we're going to be talking about today, hopefully stringing those things together. And also not just like the way in which it's not just what we're doing, but also how we're doing it as well, and trying to bring the theory from psychology over into kind of the real world. So whether that's delivering a service offering, whether it's designing a tool to change behavior, what should we be doing and how should we be doing it, basically. So just to kind of broad, what are we talking about? I want you guys to be interested in cyber behaviors. Why talk about cyber behaviors? What are cyber behaviors? Very broadly, whenever a human is interacting with the technology, that's a cyber behavior. It could be anything from using a password manager, using a VPN. It could even be as far-reaching as access control. Whether I let someone in, while it's not directly with a computer, it could lead to a threat actor getting into a server room, for example. So that would still be considered a cyber behavior. So it's super broad, but that's where we are. And I have a kind of example question for you guys to consider of a common cyber behavior, which is password management. And if I were to so in your personal and business life, how many of your passwords are the same? Now, I could go around and so people would guiltily be like, oh, it's all up here, or you've got it written down on a notepad somewhere. If you'd have asked me a couple of years ago, I would have said exactly the same thing. I would have said, I have the same, maybe I have 2 passwords, and then after that, I have a different number of letters and different special characters. And it's just about figuring out the different combinations before I get locked out, hopefully getting to the true thing. But now, if you ask me, I just use a password manager. So that's a clear example of it's still a human behavior. I still have to use the password manager. I still have to have it installed. My company still has to decide to use it. I still have to remember a password to get into the password manager and activate it in my browser. So there's still human interaction with the technology. But in this instance, the technology is kind of the nature of that interaction has changed. And so kind of the take home from that is that if we're changing, if we want to promote secure behavior, we have to make it intuitive. We have to make it easy for people. So the example of the password manager is just part of my everyday now. It's actually easier than having to spend 10 minutes trying to figure out what the password is. So we have to think from the end user's perspective, how, they've got a massive decision landscape. They've got pressures from work. Security is not always at the forefront of their mind. So what can we do to make their behavior more secure? So obviously today the focus is about DORA. Within DORA, a big part of your cybersecurity is the behaviors of the people that work for your organization. And there's always this tension between when you're designing a security tool or an intervention, between the usability and the security. So if I'm designing a piece of software, so I have an example of email, everybody receives spam email, receives junk email, right? That's a perfect example of the fact that we need to be able to use our inboxes. We need to be able to send and receive emails, but at the same time, we don't want to be the victim of a cyber attack. So the email provider, the service provider is always having to juggle this, and so that's how it ends up. A lot of the time, there are technological there are filters in place to stop certain emails getting through, but then there's also the human having to decide, firstly identify the risky, phishing email, and then also report that email, and hopefully that's you know, that email then goes to some IT support, and then it kind of is flagged within a system. So the point I also want to make here is that we absolutely should be implementing technical solutions to change behavior. You know, this isn't like an anti, you know, I'm just trying to also fight the side of the cyber behaviors, the fact that the behaviors that people are doing, and a lot of attacks you see, and you know, you look at the attack path and you take it apart, basically all of them have a human component of some kind. So we absolutely need to strengthen technical controls, but human behaviors are also important. And so at ReCyber, we're trying to sell, you know, say that it's the biggest opportunity for risk reduction is from the human. It's a complex you know, thing to do. People are complicated, everyone is different. But if you can acknowledge those things and have them at the forefront of your mind when you're designing interventions and when you're designing tools, they're just way more effective. So it's about reducing that human risk, basically.
Can I just ask a question? So in terms of, just hands up, in terms of the people factor in human behavior into their models. So to you, it's an easy way of.
So what kind of thing do you do? Is it, yeah?
Yeah, so for me, for example, I recently ran a cyber test with sales reps, and I showed them the URL. It had, for example, Cyrillic characters in the HTTPS and the so on and so on. And I said to them, so what's wrong with the URL? And in their workshop, none of them they were all like, oh, there's nothing wrong with it. And I showed them that, to the extent that the human in that case can't be trusted to do the right thing. So it's not just about humans, but it's about how we supplement our human with process tools to protect us from cyber.
Another example, I work for HSBC, and it's such a word, it's like Microsoft, the words are so common that if you look at URL, you see even if you go HBSC, your brain will go HSBC, and you think it's genuine, it transposes. Microsoft could have there's
different language, different languages.
Switch a character around, your brain will just go, that's Microsoft. And you're off going into another company.
I think it's what Matt was talking about earlier with this 95%, 5%, you know, thinking fast and slow, kind of an idea. They take advantage of that. You know, we're not investigating every link we look at just because, you know, from a practical perspective, it doesn't make sense. You know, we're trying to get on with our daily lives, and
Computers follow programs, humans don't.
Exactly.
Humans can ignore them.
Exactly.
It's simple to see even in a text. If you receive a text message from someone and they've not typed correctly, they've got typos, you can still read it. You still know exactly what it says, and you just read the words as they're meant to be.
We do tests all the time. I look after email. We do tests all the time, and where we send out an email, we're just testing. It's just a test, like that, and you can word it. And amazing how you catch people.
So we have not to kind of plug slightly what we're building is, but part of the app we've built is basically a phishing game. So it begins like the early levels are exactly like that, like everything's spelt wrong, but it's surprising how many people still click on it. And then as you get towards the end of the levels, you know, we're actually like calling them up and really, you know, it gets quite harsh towards the end. But in the beginning phase, it's surprising how easy it is to fool people. Literally just have a link and it's just all misspelled. You know, click this link now. Some people just out of curiosity sometimes. It's not even
to give me your details.
Something that I found was really interesting is the concept of importance or power of that information. So if you say to somebody, for example, your email address is really important and you don't give it to somebody, there's that fine balance between those malicious actors who want to give it away and those people who go, oh, it's so dangerous.
So the threat actors know that, and so they will use influence strategies like authority, like scarcity. That could also be scarcity, not just of like a resource, but it could be time based. So they could say, I need, you know, they're pretending to be, you know, especially with like business email compromise. That's the most convincing because it's actually coming from the right address. It's coming from, so you've done the right thing. Check the email address is right. But it's about sometimes if you're being asked to pay an invoice, for example, double checking directly with that person. You know, knock on their door, say, have you just sent me this email? You know, I just wanted to double check, because that's another way they can. You know, it's very effective.
You can fake really well nowadays. You literally almost is indiscernible. You just got to ask yourself, like you said, would they really send me that? Give them a call. Just check.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's all it takes, and that wipes out like I think like 40% of attacks involve phishing in some way. So it's
They don't expect to get everybody. They just need to get.
a numbers game, yeah, and it doesn't
It's a
cost
numbers
them. I mean, in terms of their labor, it's just pressing send on a load of emails you're generating. So and some of them now are generating like AI. They'll ask the AI to generate like emails that will be more convincing, and they'll train models to. So it's they're using that for their social engineering tactics as well. So it's making people aware of that and practicing identifying phishing emails, like in your phishing test. So the reason we've gone down the game route is to try and preserve psychological safety and make sure that we're not doing more harm than good. So when you go to that person, say, you click the link, it's less of a like telling off and more of just like, how are we going to learn, like
It's an education.
Yeah. We're not actually the threat actor. It's just if it was.
You want to help.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thanks. So this is just some examples of how cyber behaviors play out in the real world. I think we've mentioned a good few attack paths, so I won't go through each of them. But for example, the one on the left is the MGM attack. You might have seen last year. I think it was September. Their system got taken down. I think in total it cost them around $100 million. That was because they found someone the threat actor found someone on LinkedIn, or they found their target who would have sufficient permissions, called up the help desk, pretended to be them. They were locked out of their system, and they managed to get logged in on a different device. Once they were logged in, they installed ransomware, basically. And it's because of how common cyber insurance is now. Ransomware insurance is a thing. The threat actors know that. That's a whole different discussion about whether it should be paid or not. But regardless, they're getting paid, and then MGM can resume. So it costs a lot of money. Then you have KnowBe4. You probably saw that they accidentally hired a North Korean threat actor who was in a software development role. So they had lots of checks, ID checks. They had certain video calls that they had to go through. So there's that human element. But then there's also the social engineering. When they initially spotted the anomaly, they called up the new hire to say, hey, we just sent you your new work laptop. Why is there all of this traffic going on? What's happening? And the threat actor managed to buy themselves like another half an hour just by being like, oh, it's like, I'm just downloading something. It must be some VPN issue, or because they were working remotely. And that bought them half an hour. And KnowBe4 say that didn't impact the outcome of it. But you can even see there that social engineering and that incident response. And the good thing was that the laptop was actually, they did quarantine it quite quickly within half an hour. It could have been a lot longer. They might not have ever identified it. So you can see it depends which way you look at it. It's a success. It was only half an hour. But at the same time, how do you validate new hires, for example? There's a lot of potential weakness in this behavior, and it's super important to respond correctly and quickly as well. And then Ascension, similar story, just in healthcare. So this can have real world impact on people's lives. They had to go to pen and paper. Their system was taken down, and as people died as a result of mixing up of medications and stuff. So cyber behaviors are super relevant. And so how should we think about behavior? Why are these people behaving in that way? Why did the help desk person give away the credentials? Why did that person believe the threat actor, for example? Well, we follow the combi model. There are many motivation models, but basically it breaks down into capability, having the capability to do the secure or the insecure behavior. Opportunity, so what are the norms around you? Do you have the time to do it? Are you under pressure? And then motivation. So for example, am I doing something to avoid punishment? Am I doing it because I'll get rewarded for it? Am I doing it because I just love security? Because I love, there are many reasons why people do things, but the combi model is sort of a great way to think about why people are doing what they're doing. And the bit I've highlighted in red here is basically, if you just do training, that's the slice of the pie that you're working on. You're just basically in the psychological capability bracket, which is if someone behaving insecurely because they just simply don't know what to do. That's what the training is giving you. And it's not even giving you 100%, because obviously people can just skip through slides, it's like, but in an ideal world, even if you got it perfect, you'd still only cover a bit of that pie. You're not changing the kind of norms or the leadership that I'm seeing, the kind of role models of what's the done thing. You're not increasing the time. Am I under pressure to do other tasks? Is cybersecurity prioritized? Those kind of things. So it's about like taking a kind of wider view of why people are doing what they're doing. So there are many things you can do to change it. I just spoke about the red triangle there, which is training and education. The only thing I'd say with training and education is to do it little and often. It's kind of an obvious thing, but you know, you wouldn't go to the gym once a year and expect to be really fit and be able to run a marathon, right? So try and see it in the same way, similar to, you know, if you're training to deliver CPR, you need refresher courses. You need to make sure you still know what you're doing, and also individuate. You know, everybody's different, so whether that be individuating to a team level, is this information even relevant if I'm in sales versus IT, for example? So that's the first step, segment based on that. And then the second filter is to the individual level. So what are their specific weaknesses? And how do you decide that? Well, you can decide it through observations, surveys, interviews, technical data, if you have any, on, you know, the number of reports, the number of incidents. You can look at industry trends as well. That's really, I would follow industry trends. For example, right now, people are putting QR codes in PDFs. So everybody's kind of like cottoned on like, oh, like that I shouldn't click on that link. But then like, oh, it's only a PDF. And then they're not thinking, oh, if I now scan that QR code, basically the filters can't detect the QR within the attachment. So following the latest trends is also really something that you should be doing, or at least subscribe to some cyber news thing. And then, yeah, just read the top tier. That's generally what I do every day. Just a little couple, what's going on in the world, you know? And then there are a lot of other things you can do. So simulated attacks, so phishing tests are a great one because you're actually getting people to, you know, they're learning through experience. That's one of the best ways you can learn. As I mentioned earlier, just try and preserve psychological safety. Make sure that you're not hurting people in the process of trying to help them. We do it through a game, but you could do it through, you know, it's mainly the way it's handled, in the way when you approach that person, how you're speaking with them, and also you're not making it public, you know, that everybody knows that person clicked on the link, you know. Their bells don't start going off when they click the link or something.
Stand in the corner.
Yeah, exactly. And then, oh yeah, and if you can get metrics beyond just clicking and reporting, because those are two extremes, you know. If you click on the link, that's the worst thing you could ever do. Reporting is the best thing you can ever do. But there's a lot going on in the middle, so try and understand like what's motivating people to click on the link, or how engaged are people, and try and correlate those metrics to someone's likelihood. So you're getting kind of a greater fidelity of understanding of why people are doing it, rather than just like they're either perfect or they're awful, you know. So really quickly, interactive workshops, it's just hands-on learning. We get them to do it from the attacker's perspective. So like 2 to 4 hours, you get everyone in a room and we get them hands-on with like key loggers. So like people are like amazed. We set up a reverse shell on someone else's laptop and then get the person to start typing, and people are like amazed with that. We also do password cracking, like loads of really cool stuff. You're thinking like, I come to work and now I get half a day of hacking into my own company. Well, we base it on a similar company, you know. It's not, yeah, yeah. So that's really good fun. But when we're designing our attack path, we do look at, so I obviously am in psychology, but I work with social engineers and like red teamers and stuff. So we all kind of get together and decide what we're going to do.
Yeah, the most important part was trying to get a pay rise, wasn't it, on hacking the HR system?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, they didn't approve that one. They didn't believe that. Adaptive security. So yeah, just tools that can be used every day, like a VPN, like a password manager, things like that. And then incident that's more kind of process management. So yeah, so that was for the cyber team, and over to Will for the GRC.
Yeah. So obviously there's lots of behaviours, but as you all know, DORA is all about documentation and evidence and traceability and artifacts to support that. So, you know, you have to look at demonstrating that you've been through and assessed your staff, your third parties. So the most important things is your third party staff, because they get access to companies that you know you wouldn't necessarily think they're doing stuff in the background, like, you know, doing a patch upgrade. That whole process, they need to be instilled in their behaviors to make sure that it's compliant with your organization. So it's important that, and so my background is, so I worked at Lloyd's and NatWest, and more recently with fintech companies around compliance and financial crime. So it's important that you get a lot of false positives in your evidence. So you have to work out what true value and metrics are before you then start thinking, I need to be DORA compliant, I need to look at this regulation. So obviously data is very key to that. And so it's not just, the cultural element that you've got people doing cyber awareness and throughput. It's more that you've identified the risks and entry points that can happen based on a human, not just IT cyber security. So from a governance point of view, obviously, is the main thing is you have that people can actually understand and interpret. Obviously, a lot of organisations, they create policies, they create the committees, but they don't live and breathe it. So it's how do you make sure that they live and breathe that policy, and then trying to bring in that the risk assessments, procedures, and processes that organisations need to do for cyber security, for even new joiners, leavers, exiting systems, moving of legacy systems onto new ones, on-premise versus cloud is a totally different sort of behaviour that you need to think about from a human point of view. Because now with Active Directories and such like, you can quite easily change someone's profile in a second, and it can have a major impact. And you need to make sure that you're not creating toxic user cases and stuff like that. So it's that's from a sort of technology point of view, but you have to think about it from a human point of view as well, is that they understand their profile. A lot of the big organizations, they do obviously the access reviews, and they get second line approval of those access that you've got to a payment system, for instance. But a lot of people then are working on a project and are using that access. They'll only complain when it doesn't work, but it's actually that access may have been just sitting there for years or for a long time that they've used from a previous project. So how do you ensure that that they've done the due diligence to actually think about, yeah, I don't need that access. A lot of people, they just keep it, don't you? Because it's much harder to exit that access. And then obviously it's covering the compliance mantra of operational risk, and demonstrating to the regulators that the people in their roles and decision making are sort of fit for purpose, and you have a way of escalating and managing your cyber.
So when you talked about false positives, when you're doing like assessments of new starters and that sort of thing, what sort of things does that mean? Does that mean you're saying you've got a result that looks like they are a risk maybe, and you have to determine whether it's true or false? And
yeah, so if I take sort of financial crime perspective, so if a new customer, so I'm doing it from a customer point of view, but it's no different from an employee. People have lots of very similar names. So what we have seen is that people try and use common names, addresses for a tower block, for instance. So, it's a flat in this complex. So they've got the postcode, they've got lots of sort of private information. And then they use that to try and open an account or whatever. So then that creates a lot of noise. You've got like you've got sanctions screening, payment releasing and such like. So you have a time pressure to approve that payment, look at the rule, look at the alert. And it creates, with those similar names, creates a lot of false positives. So you have to quickly, some operatives could take the, oh, I've seen this one before, I'm just going to say it's a false positive, but it might not be because of the subtleties, like the URL example. It's the subtleties of change of alerts that you need to be aware of, and it's just making it not repetitive so that people just switch off and still think about what the process is and what what good looks like. Okay. Do you want to talk about this?
I can do, yeah.
Yeah.
So this one is just to kind of talk about culture and just highlight the fact that it is something that's important. It's something we should be thinking about. But I would just I would say that culture is essentially almost descriptive way of describing the beliefs and norms and the truisms of a large group of people. So you can have a different culture depending on department, depending on the organization. And so the point here is that culture is valuable, but I would start with the specific risky behaviors that are happening, try and measure the risk for those specific behaviors and then intervene for those specific behaviors. Culture maybe could be useful if you want to zoom out and you want to kind of get a bigger picture, but I wouldn't get lost in the weeds of multiple culture assessments that kind of give you, in terms of the actionable findings, it might say, you know, oh, you have a culture about, nobody cares about security, but that you need to go kind of deeper to the causal factors that are underpinning why people don't care about security. So is it because their bosses don't care about security? Is it because, so basically try and focus on the specific behavior and why that specific behavior isn't happening. So yeah, I guess that was just a point on culture, basically. So this is the behavior roadmap. What would I do if I was beginning? Someone said, you've got to go and fix your behaviors. I would begin with a gap analysis. So you need to know what your risk is. So for Recyber, we have like a behavioral taxonomy. So we've identified 181 risky behaviors that we think an organization could face. So you would basically devise your own version of that for your specific company. So if we work with a company, we'll segment things that aren't relevant to them, but that's where you begin. And then you have to look at classic risk modeling of how likely is it to happen, and if it happens, how severe is it going to be? But then also go out and try and get a measure for each of those. So it could be, I think I mentioned earlier, you could observe them, you could interview them, you could look at industry norms. And we basically built a bit of software that it's kind of like it's like a hub for cyber behaviors. So it delivers questions to you. You can watch videos. It's got this built-in phishing game, and basically everything they do within that app is a behavioral metric and tracks back to your risk taxonomy. So any workshops you run, any awareness programs you run should always map back to. So you should take a taxonomic approach to measuring your behavioral risk. So basically then everything that you do, whether it's a poster campaign, whether it's a phishing test, whether it's a workshop or an attack simulation or a social engineering pen test, a socially behaviorally focused pen test or open source intelligence, whatever you're doing, you can say we're doing this because we've identified that this is the risk and we've done something about it. So it's very, and also you can assess the health of different departments as well. We don't tend to go below like 3 users just because of psychological safety. We don't want to be blaming people, but we go down to at least a team level to say that this team is this workshop or this intervention. And that comes directly from the gap analysis. So different things you can use. Awareness strategy is probably an easy win. Like a lot of companies already have it, so might as well use it. The only thing I would say is just make it super specific. Just go for one. Just go for like a small win, like you should be using a password manager or whatever that is. Adaptive learning. So I spoke about earlier about one effective strategy is taking the attacker's perspective, making people have that kind of, they almost self-police themselves. Like when they're doing the workshop, they're then like, oh, maybe I might have got caught out with that. And so you're not even having to blame them. You're not even having to shine the light on them. They're actually being a successful attacker that's doing getting hands on, but seeing the other perspective. So try and be dynamic in the training that you do bring in. I think like normally they'll do it like at least once a year, that kind of workshop, because it is a bigger thing. You've got to like get everyone together, but it's worthwhile. Behavior-driven incident response. So this is things like cyber war games. So we'll do like incident. There was a company we were speaking to earlier. They've like basically generated incident. An incident will happen, and you're sort of interacting with different AI bots that are chatting back with you, and you're simulating a response. So things like that, being creative. And we hopefully work with them. We were seeing how we could like integrate what we built with them, and so that's really cool. And then positive reinforcement, more carrot and less stick. So like within our software, we have like virtual coins, and then you can spend those coins on like a cup of coffee or planting a tree, and then that's going back to the intrinsic motivation stuff we were talking about earlier about why people behave the way they do. What's in it for me? And if you can make people, and also extrinsic motivation, physically giving people hobbies is tangible. And the company's also complying at the same time. I mean, that's sort of the benefit, is like compliance will happen if you just do these things. So yeah, and preserving psychological safety is super important. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I've already plugged the software quite hard, but so yeah, it's basically a feed, and you get notifications and everything else. I can email, we can chat about it. And then that's just a load of services that we do as well. So thank you. Do you have anything to add, sorry, Will?
Yeah, so I guess it's in terms of this is obviously what Lee's talking about is a software system, and it's more about the actual process of engaging and ways of working and the operating rhythm that you instill in an organization. So I want you to sort of come away from today not just think about the IT element, but also just the human element, is that everybody is different. So you have to mix it up and make it customizable and relevant to people, so that they feel they've got ownership. And to be honest, in our personal lives, we're dealing with the same behaviors. So you've all got online banking and such like. So you know what they should be looking for. So if you try and think about it in terms of in their shoes, what would really a good way of engaging with them.
Okay, I'm happy.
Yeah, we did run a session here one evening, a simulation. It was run by, what was James Bohr's company?
Bohr's. Yeah.
Yeah, and they they basically set up a scenario, and we had to try to figure out what was going on, a cyber attack and all that kind of stuff. It was actually fun. So that's a similar thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, it's basically
train companies.
Yeah, so at the minimum level, you've got like tabletop game, which is quite popular at the moment. Like I think the British police are using it to train their staff. So that's like just a board game where you flip cards and go through a story.
Yeah.
Then you've got sounding maybe what you guys have experienced, which is like a middle between that. And then the thing that we do is like a longer session, getting people involved, and we actually go through multiple attack paths as well, because you don't want the resistance from the crowd, like, oh, that wouldn't really work. So we're like, well, let's do 3. So then we do 3 different attacks.
I quite like the hands-on aspect actually of what you do, where you're actually hacking in your own company.
Your password cracking. We also do smishing tech, like phishing by text, basically smishing. And we get them to write their own smishes. We get them up on the board anonymously, and then everybody rates what's the best smish. And then whichever is the most convincing, we then fictitiously send out to the target. So it's a whole, but it changes depending on the organization. But for that one, it was smishing was a problem.
Quish now, having
Quish QR, yes, yeah.
QR codes.
Yeah.
Quished. You get Quish. My son told me, I didn't even know. He's 16 years old. People are going up and they're sticking a sticker, QR code, over the QR code.
Yeah,
So
in like parking, shopping,
parking.
Yeah, because everyone's so used to paying at the thing.
Yeah.
So I managed to report one of my colleagues to O2 for smishing me the other day, and it was a genuine thing. He was having me on.
You get people go really far. Well, I remember a company came in, it was about 10, 15 years ago. He's something like it was they're an ethical hacking company where they actually engineered on the back of Cheryl Cole going in and seeing a company.
Nice.
And they to including the point where they employed security guards and guard dogs. They did everything, walked into the building.
Wow.
They said, we're doing a security keep because Cheryl Cole came to you and she wants to come and see you again. So we're just doing a security sweep, and they engineered the whole thing. Right? They went into the toilets, they dropped USB sticks, they just
USB drops,
the USB drops and everything like that. Then they came out and there was the actual people in the foyer that were waiting to find out when Cheryl Cole was coming, and that's when they dropped the bomb. This was an ethical hack. Very silly. Stuff like that. But it's the human part of it is the most critical, most vulnerable thing, because that's where you make like the 95.5%. That's where the decision goes wrong, and that's where you get caught.
Yeah. So there are some tools now where it's like as they're actually tracking your cursor, your mouse when you're on your device, and as you move towards a link that the computer doesn't recognize, it will actually pop up a notification say, "Are you sure?" So that's one way of trying to switch on that kind of like 5% part of your brain where you're coming out of that automatic thing right in that moment. It's saying, "Are you sure? Have you do you recognize the email? Those kind of questions.
And that's
It's hard
not
to
even
do.
words, is it? It's pictures now. It's like character recognition is like sticking the,
Yeah.
how many credit card numbers could I get in a picture that you won't see, but it goes out because we know that security software can't scan a picture.
Exactly. Yeah. They'll just experiment. It's just trial and error, whatever gets through.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.